there's different ways to evaluate candidates. So I think the best way is to find the company which you are, or probably a research lab where you want to work, and to see how your profile matches to what they want. For example, when I see resumes, what I look is that there are many great candidates with which we don't move forward because there is just not overlap in terms of interests. And another thing that I look, so there are certain things we want people to do on our team, and one of them, we want people to know what they want to do. We want people to be their own drivers and their own reasons for success. And so when you talk to a person, you can very quickly understand if a person has an agenda behind them and they will pursue this agenda. And importantly, this agenda must match what we want to do. So I think it's indeed, you can put a lot of stuff in your resume, but for example, I will probably look at your publications, look at which papers you have done yourself. I mean, you're the primary contributor or like secondary. So it many times people might not be that familiar with the papers in which they're, let's say, fifth author or something. So it's important to know what you have done in the area. And I will talk with every person about those works to see how passionate are they and whether they have something to say in those fields. So I think, if I have to summarize, I think it's important to know where you're applying and to know what these people are looking at. It's also important not to apply to hundreds of or tens of places, but to find the right place for you and to make sure that you kind of know what they want. That would be the best, I think.
Yeah, that's great to hear it from you, Sergey. And when you talk about it, right, looking into papers, looking into your the impact of each particular individual, it comes to my mind here. So maybe you could share some thoughts on how the impact of research, the impact of your own work is measured, right? Differently from from the perspective of academia versus industry. So, for instance, if I'm applying to a position, right, but I'm not, let's say, top tier publications yet, due to several constraints here. So, particularly speaking in the Latin America context, where many of our students have a lack of resources and so on, so it makes it difficult for them to play at the same level, right, with others from US and Europe and so on. So how can we, how industry and academia can measure the impact of research from individuals, right, and what they can do to share and show impact, or they are really up to the task, to the job, right? We can make anybody different, right? How people can share their own perspective, even though they don't have those kind of top tier publication. How those people can be noticed. So if you can try to follow up on this matter, that would be good to hear from you. Maybe Sergey and probably Guillermo after that.
Okay, so I think the short answer is that not everyone has these top conferences such as CVPR, and I have to say that my experience is that every time we do something for CVPR, every time is super difficult, and it's super hard for everyone. So I don't know whether, I think everyone understands that it's very hard to get into such conferences. I think what would be the most important is that you show passion and you also show experience. And experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have 10 papers. It might be one paper, but a very good one, which indeed there is some thinking and something you have to tell, and you can clearly explain why this is an interesting research to do. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be like an oral, it doesn't have to be a best paper nominant, but it has to be something you're really passionate about. And if you are passionate, the best thing to do is to find a place where their passion is similar to your passion, and that's how you can get in. And the more experienced you are, sometimes you get more co-authors, more people who work with you, and you will get to those publications. I think the hardest is the first, is as usual.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your thoughts on it. Guillermo, could you please join us on this?
Okay, thanks for having me. Let me just briefly comment on your previous question, and then I'm going to go to this question. So
yeah, sure. And if you please could briefly introduce you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Guillermo Shapiro. I'm currently at Apple, and I have 25 plus years of academia as a faculty, and I'm currently on sabbatical, and I'm working at Apple. So that basically explains why there is the question academia versus industry should be rephrased, because not necessarily it's one or the other, and both academia and industry have significantly changed in recent years, more than before. And most, I think, if not all, most of the companies represented here have a very serious involvement with students and faculty from academia. And most universities also have faculty heavily involved with industry. So I encourage people not to think about one versus the other, but think about the evolution of both industry and academia together, and one helping the other. So it's not a competition, it's working together. And that is how I see that. Regarding your second question, I will be happy to address more on the first. Regarding your second question, you raise a very good point. Sometimes without a standard CV, it's hard to get the door open. But we and many others look at the person and not just their publication record, and we calibrate based on where they come from. And also, I want to let everybody know that the system has very limited memory. So you might say, oh, I got a hard time getting in my academic position, getting an interview at University X, which is the top 5. But you go to another university and you're very successful, and then that university will pay attention to you pretty fast as well. And the same happens to industry. So just, my only recommendation is follow your passion and do good work. Ignore if your work is accepted by 3 anonymous reviewers that made an very often arbitrary decision on your work. Just concentrate on doing good work, and the community will value your work. And that should be your only focus. Thanks.
Thank you, Guillermo, for your thoughts on it. Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more with you. And yeah, I definitely agree with this point. It's not academia versus industry. It's not a competition, of course. The idea is both together. But the idea was not to make this as a competition, but to think, a different context from what I expect, right? In the perspective of academia, in the perspective of industry. So, for instance, if you're applying, we can get into it in the next interactions. But if you are applying for internship in a university or in a lab from a university, or trying to an internship in a big tech, right? Company. So those perspectives that would be good to be discussed in the future. But if any of the others, Nikhil, Fabian, or Brian, would you like to join us in those first questions here?
Correct. Yeah. So first of all, my name is Fabian. So I'm probably the more junior one here in the panel. So I did my PhD and finished it in 2019. So I have been at the industry for 2 years already. at Adobe. And I do agree with Guillermo about like, don't put this like big like separation between academic and industry. But I would actually think it in other way, right? So whether you want to do long-term research or whether you want to do short-term research or cycles, right? So usually in academia or like traditional like university setup, so we may think about long-term cycles most of the time. So we may pick a problem where we know it may take a couple of years to actually reach out a decent solution. But many times in industry, you actually try to address short-term problems, right? Because you want to make an impact into the company's products and so on. So that's not the case in all industry. So it depends which research lab you join or which company you join in general. But yeah, I mean, I would invite the people to think about that, basically, whether they want to do long-term research, whether they want to work in a project for a long-term time, or whether they want to jump into short-term cycles and productize technologies that can impact products. So yeah, I will add that from the first question about academic versus industry. And about the Latin American environment, where I'm originally from Colombia, I had the opportunity to travel around and do my PhD outside Colombia. But I mean, something I suggest, or like something that I always tell to people I've been able to mentor back in Colombia or in other Latin American countries, is to follow your passion. I think that will lead you to a good place. But also think about which are like the unique problems your community have, right? So how can you help the Latin American community is something you may think about, because I think Guillermo and Sergey also mentioned this. Like, it's not only about the publications you have, but what is your profile, right? So what uniqueness can you bring to the company, or what uniqueness can you bring to the team, right? So usually bringing diverse perspective can lead to unimagined solutions, right? So that's why I wouldn't constrain people to think like, oh, I don't have publications, so I may not be able to join big companies because they will require this set of publications. I would say that is not true, because I think all companies value diversity and diverse ideas from different contexts.
Yeah, that's great here. And I guess here the word is passion, right? So all of you already mentioned this. Have to have to be passion, to have passion, right, on your work, and eventually it will lead you to success, right? So yeah, it's great to hear that. I guess Brian or DQ was about to join us, right? So please feel free to share your thoughts.
I can maybe join next. So I'm Brian Russell. I'm at Adobe. I'm a researcher. So I agree with all points. I think there have been a number of great points, and I definitely love Guillermo's point. My advisor just said, "Do good work." I think that's basically what will stand out. In addition to passion, I would say perseverance as well. I think if you're very persistent about trying to succeed and so on, I think people are going to eventually latch on. I think trying to absorb as much as you can from your collaborators and just work really hard. I think that those are kind of like the keys to success. And not losing hope. I think that those are the main things. In terms of academia and industry, so I think my first boss, David Salison, he had this great way, I think, or great take on this, which was, at least when for his group, it was like, instead of thinking of like, a teaching load, think of like how to have high impact for the company or make large impact for the company. And I think there are nice trade-offs, for either place. So I think both jobs are great. And I think, on the academia side, and I got to, experience that for a while, like as a postdoc and a research scientist in the university, that, you can have a lot of impact with, with teaching and with mentoring and these things. But you can also do similar things in industry. So like, I have to give a lot of talks inside of the company, or like, meet with a lot of people or mentor, people inside the company. So there are lots of different ways, if you care about, if you're passionate about those things, to do that inside of a company as well. As been pointed out before, also, you can do great research in both places. I mean, you can work with, great people in both places. So I think for me, it came down, the decision came down to, just other factors, like, where I wanted to live, what I wanted, my everyday life to be like. And so, I think if those are, I would pay attention to those kind of factors. And oftentimes, maybe another thing that's just a practical thing in terms of interviewing, places, try to go in with, a purpose, like, figure out like what are going to be your factors for making a decision. Oftentimes, like actually one of my colleagues asks that, like, what's going to be your factor for deciding, and how can we help, help you with that. So I think, having those things in mind is important. Okay, sorry if I talked too long. So.
No, definitely. I appreciate your point of view and thank you for your thoughts on it. Brian, maybe Niku, could you please join us here?
Sure, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great, yeah. So there's been a lot of good points made by all the speakers who came before. My name is Nikhil Naik. I'm a researcher at Salesforce. And I want to probably talk about something that hasn't been covered before, and following up on Brian's point, when you're considering academia versus industry, think about kind of some of the personal interests that you have beyond research. I mean, all of us are obviously passionate about doing good research, but jobs in industry and academia come with other types of responsibilities or other parts of the job. And you should think about which of these you enjoy more, or maybe sometimes you don't like some of these things. So for example, you are really passionate about teaching, you really like teaching undergraduate courses or communicating knowledge, so you enjoy that. Maybe you want to work on a really crazy idea and you want to have like a 10 people team and follow some impossible dream. Or maybe so you don't want anyone to tell you what you want to work on. You want to you have kind of very strong idea that you want to work on. Or maybe your work requires just a lot of computing resources. So I think depending on such individual interests you might have, one or the other might make better sense for you. So for example, if you just love teaching and you want to make sure that's something that you are able to do every year, every semester, that's definitely harder in industry as compared to academia. Or in contrast, if you want to work on some idea that require a lot of data and compute, that's probably easier in industry versus academia. So both of these come with kind of additional responsibilities, constraints, and also kind of positives. So you should think about what fits more into your personal interests as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your thoughts, Niku. And yeah, I guess here, of course, passion, persistence, and looking beyond, right? Not only what you're doing here in terms of research, but also looking, above and beyond, right? So yeah, thank you a lot for your thoughts here. So let me ask, anybody from the audience want to make some questions here? I saw that Carlo joined the question area. So Carlo, if you want to bring up something. Or Marisa is here, so I guess you are free to unmute. Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Marissa. Thank you all so much for being here. It's been really interesting. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley and am at Adobe Research for the summer. But I kind of had some questions along the lines of talking about non-traditional backgrounds. So I am doing a career-focused change, going from more traditional numerics and geometry to now vision and learning-informed geometry. And I'm just wondering, kind of, you guys were talking about passion, how you look at the person and all that type of stuff, but how do you kind of sell a career change like that if it happened pretty late in your PhD? Would you recommend doing a postdoc, or do you think just having one solid industry research internship is enough?
Yeah, please. Anybody want to follow up with Marisa?
Hey, it's Monica. I'm sorry my camera is not working so great right now. I'm getting some Wi-Fi problems. But for us, when we're looking, I think is where you mentioned the one solid research internship is great. I think that's one of the things we're changing our perspective now in how we recruit in general, and specifically within diverse communities. We're looking more at overall attributes. It's not just about the skill set that you're bringing, it's attributes, potential. So someone like you with a different background is perfect. That's, we're looking for that. It's not, it's not just backgrounds anymore, either too, where you're looking for diverse perspectives on race, gender, or ethnicity. You're looking at diverse perspectives for people who come from different backgrounds. That's how breakthroughs happen, is where people who come from different training come in and say, hey, have you ever thought of this? It sounds so simple and silly, but it really, for us, is what really has made a difference and what's really had propelled us forward as a company. So that internship is what, for us, when we're looking at resumes, that helps us definitely identify you. And that one solid one, perfect. You don't need to have more. You don't need to necessarily do a postdoc unless you want to.
Yeah, maybe Guillermo, with your experience from both academia versus industry, could give some thoughts on Marissa's question.
So I would just completely agree with Monica that we go back to what we said before. You might have an extraordinary internship this summer, and that might be sufficient. Actually, I was kind of laughing when you were saying, because my PhD was all on geometry and differential geometry and basic understanding of geometry. Brian was mentioning David. David was a geometer for a long time, and I'm actually one of the early people in this area that work both in industry and academia at the same time for many, many years. So I don't think I see only good things in your background.
Yeah, so that's great. Any more questions? Okay, so let me, with this comment from Marissa regarding, different backgrounds and so on, makes me thinking here. So with all of these discussions between, getting into positions, right, specifically in industry and so on. So what you could share with us regarding the fact that, so it would be necessary, so is having a PhD required, right, to conduct research or to get a position in the industry, for instance? So could you please try to share some thoughts on it? The reverse order, maybe Brian could start this conversation, or anybody who wants to join us, please feel free to do it.
So certainly a PhD is not required to apply to an industry job. I mean, you can definitely find, engineering, software developer roles. I think if PhD helps, I would definitely say, just because it gives you kind of the training, I would say, for being an independent researcher. I had a professor once who said, one of the things that you ultimately learn as a PhD student actually is how to take an unstructured problem, put structure to it, and communicate it effectively. And I think that kind of training then translates to lots of different problem domains and these things. So I would say that those are kind of like the skills that that you would want to hone in on in order to be an effective researcher, I would say. And maybe just as a corollary, I've always been told, don't give a bad talk. So definitely the communication part is also important.
Yeah, great. Maybe Sergey or Fabian, if you want to.
I can maybe. Go ahead.
So what I want to add is that I think these days you are seeing some people become pretty successful in research who do not have PhDs, and there are also unconventional paths like AI residency programs through which people then become full-time researchers. But in some ways, those programs themselves kind of serve as a compressed PhD training, but in industry. So I would say there are some, I think, ways to enter industry research without having a PhD. But as Brian said, having a PhD does give you a lot of valuable training and kind of stuff. It trains you to how to think about a new problem, how to tackle a new problem, and how to do that repeatedly, to get better and better at it. And I think it's the time you spend doing it in a PhD probably helps you become more successful over the long run. But I think there are people who seem to be able to not have to go through that path as well.
Yeah.
Pedro, can I just make a comment one
please.
of your previous questions about summer internships, and I know it's less traditional for people that are basically doing their graduate degree in South America to consider summer internships in industry, something that is becoming very common in the United States. So I do encourage every student to spend some time in industry. I think it's an outstanding experience. So break that tradition maybe in your country if it's not a common tradition to do it. Just try to do it. Even the local industry doesn't have to go, but I think it's a great experience for students to spend summers in industry or a period, spend a semester in industry. So it doesn't matter if you graduate 6 months later. I think what you're gonna basically learn and mature during that time in industry has basically infinite value and is worth the potential delay in graduating.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing this, and I couldn't agree more, Guillermo, again. And yes, I think much people are looking into it, and I dare to say that most of our audience, as a LatinX individuals here, are looking for it. We are with this mentoring program that we shared, in the lobby early, and our numbers, says here that most of our members, most of our graduate students are looking into it, but eventually finding some barriers and so on, but keep moving, right, and keep being persistent, trying to look for a place. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. So thank you for that. Anybody else want to, maybe Sergey?
I can. I think I want to add also to the point that do your internship. I think every internship that I did in industries was basically me multiplied by 10. I really say so. You get 3 months, but you work like it was a year or something. So in 3 months, you can get something out of you that was unthinkable in your lab. And I also agree that it doesn't matter how much time you spend on your PhD, it matters. I mean, I would probably continue doing PhD forever. It was just a great experience, and it's just that I was able to find a place to continue to do what I liked in a company. So, but otherwise, I would stay another year, and every year you stay, your output doubles or triples. So maybe the first couple of years are the hardest. Then maybe in the third year you understand what your community wants, how to address reviewer 2, how to write such that the reviewer 2 doesn't have anything to say. And in the last year you kind of see these things. You can help your more junior peers navigate the same landscape. And as the longer you stay, actually the better. So, and another thing that PhD teaches, apart from structuring unstructured, it's also perseverance skills. For example, for me, the first maybe year was the hardest and the darkest period. And as you move on, you kind of, first you learn to persevere, second you know how to do it better, and third you understand that what you're doing is something you like, because if you don't like, why are you doing something that is so hard? So I think it's definitely helps, but in every job posting, I guess there is PhD or related or similar experience. So you can get similar experience otherwise in a company or or somehow otherwise. But I think for research positions, and I think research scientists, there are also research engineers, I think PhD is just a more standard way of getting in.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this, Sergey. Fabian, Monica, do you have anything to add into this topic?
Not from my side. I think I agree with all points. I think all of them were very great points. Maybe just quick add as well, and this is related maybe with Nikhil's point about the residency programs. So maybe one option you can think about as well is you may get this training that a typical PhD program can give you as well in industry, right? So you may join a research engineer position, and while in this position, you may acquire the skills required to publish in top-tier conference and so on. So I don't think it's required. I mean, as Brian mentioned at the beginning, like, it gives you training, but you can also get this training while on industry, especially now that we have many researchers in industry, right? So we have a lot of talent coming from academia on industry. So I think there is this new modality as well happening nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. Monica?
I'm in agreement. I don't really have much to add more than what they both covered.
Yeah, great. So thank you for sharing this. I guess we are agree that it's not a requirement, right? But of course, it's a very good training how to be more mature, right, and so on. So thank you for sharing this. So anybody else from the audience want to join our conversation here? Want to ask some questions? Well, I don't think so. So Marisa, are you joining us or? Okay. So.
Oh, I just didn't know how to get out of the question thing, but I have another question if no one else has any.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I was wondering if you could explain what the interview process is like for a research scientist. Do you have to do a code screen? How much does your engineering abilities matter? Job talks. Also, like what the timeline is. If you're planning on graduating in May, when should you start doing interviews?
So please, anyone would start answering, Marisa?
Sure, I can start it. Again, apologize, my camera, I keep trying to turn it on and now it just seems to be a shade of gray when I do it. So if you're graduating in May, so the recruitment cycle, just first of all, it's every recruitment season starts in the fall for the following year. So if you're graduating, which May are you graduating, Marissa?
I don't know yet, but sometime between May 2022 and...
Never ask that of a PhD student. It's like asking me my age, right? I should never ask you when you're going to graduate. But so if you're looking, let's say you're going in May of next year, you would want to start looking in fall of this year. That's the general cycle. But the truth of the matter is, I think I can feel comfortable saying this. Any of my talent competitors, we're looking year round. We're always looking. But traditionally, a lot of companies, especially with our new college grad headcount, whether it's research or not, you plan, like the way that the recruitment season goes and engagement, especially like at Berkeley, we would start recruiting in, I think Berkeley, we start August or like early September for the following year. So that's kind of what you want to do, generally looking. But when there's individuals like you and there's great candidates, it's really a year-round engagement. We're always looking, if that makes sense. So I can answer that question. Was there another one that you had? I'm sorry.
Just what the interview process is like.
Oh, that's different for every company and actually even different research teams inside NVIDIA do it differently. I'm going to send that one over to our researchers here who are doing interviewing. Maybe they can talk about the process on their side.
Yeah, please.
I can talk a little bit of. So there are companies which interview cycle is longer. There are companies which are very fast in recruiting, and so it also matters which company you want to join. Then regarding the interview process, I think like in our company, we first just do a discussion whether to see what the person wants to do. And we match this internally with what we want to do as a team and as a company and how the person can contribute to those visions. Then there are, I think, some theoretical discussions whether the person knows basic, let's say, if that's a machine learning position or computer vision, basic computer vision concepts. It doesn't have to be that the person can prove them or derive, but just that the person understands. Then there are some technical, maybe coding interviews. The reason for the coding interviews is not that we want like a person with software engineer type of skills, but what we want to identify is the person will be able to code themselves, to do their job themselves. If they don't know how to do a quick sort or something like that, that's fine, as long as they know what's a quick sort and stuff like that. So And for jobs, usually we require a 1 hour, like a talk discussion with, let's say, this is what I want to do in the future. This is why I want to do it. And this is, I think, what makes me suitable to do those things. It's like my past experience, internships, publications, and stuff like that. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
The process usually starts actually if you you submit materials. So you'll submit like a CV recommendation, or people who could test on your behalf. A test on your behalf, like your research contributions. So it could include a mentor, or sorry, your advisor, or your collaborators. These things. Okay, so then that goes into an internal committee who will they evaluate applications from lots of different candidates and make a decision in terms of who to bring in for interviews. Okay, so now that if you pass that step, then you come in for the interview, what to expect is, and again, this is going to be different from place to place, but at Adobe, it's going to be essentially you'll give a job talk. So if you pay attention at university, you'll see people, professors do this. So they'll give an hour-long talk. It's basically the same thing. So expect that it's an hour-long time slot. You'll give a talk, take questions, make sure that you take questions. But I think one thing that's important is to kind of make sure at some point in your talk, and people typically do this at the end, what is kind of like your vision for the future, right? And how you think you could have impact going forward. I think that's important to get across, just because the whole part of the interview process is trying to figure out what the fit is, and and what will be kind of your impact, or your relative impact at the the company. Okay, so you give your job talk for an hour. And then after that, it's going to be a series of one-on-one meetings with people who will be part of your team, people who may sit in product groups, et cetera, et cetera. And then, I would view the interview process as kind of a two-way dialogue, and that, the people who are interviewing you are evaluating to see like if you're, could be a good fit, or how they would collaborate with you. But also think of it the other way, is like, how would you collaborate with them? And, and try to figure out like if it's a good fit for you and your interests. Because that may not align from your perspective. And if this was in person, typically there would also be like a meal, like a lunch or dinner or whatever as part of it. And then that's it. And then you finish, and then there's a decision that's made by a committee internally. And depending on different companies have different time windows in terms of making, when you have to make a decision by. So one advice I have is, try to have everything kind of be, roughly timed, so that, if you're considering multiple places, you can make a decision in time.
Okay, great, Brian, for your thoughts, Monica and Sergey as well. So, we are almost running out of time here, but I would like to go, into the end of this discussion here. With another questions, and let's try to pass through it briefly. But most people are here looking for knowing other people, for developing new connections and expanding network and so on. That's why we will receive this social gathering after the day, at the end of the day here today. So how important is networking? Building connections. For you to go for your dream position, industry, or your dream graduate program, or so on. So could you please try to elaborate a bit on it, very briefly, due to a matter of time? Maybe starting with Nikhil or Guillermo.
Thanks, Pedro. Before we close, thanks for having me and for running this session. I would say that the connections are important because it's an opportunity for you to prove yourself and how smart and how great you are. So think about that. Don't think about, I need to know 25 people. Think about following some of the questions before. Somebody was asking, what if I only have one paper? That's your opportunity to show that one paper is outstanding. And skip the bean counting, which unfortunately happens very often in the community. So think about it as a way to demonstrate yourself. not as a way of counting how many connections you have. Same way that you shouldn't be counting how many papers you have. You should be counting how good papers you have and how good connections you have. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Guillermo. Yeah, again, I couldn't agree more with your discussion. So please, Nico.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say that also to follow up on what Guillermo said earlier, as long as you're doing great work, I think people will actually find you and form a connection with you. I think the community is great at that. So one way of getting noticed if you don't have connection is to actually do something that's novel and that's a lot of people appreciate.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Nico. Anybody else wants to make comments on it before we are going to the closing remarks here? Fabian, Sergey, anybody?
I think I would probably make one more comment. I think connections make sense when they make sense. For example, if you know someone who is doing the work that you want to do, try to connect, try to show your one single paper that you think is great and show that you're interested in what they're doing. And that might bring you some opportunities, might not. But that's definitely a good thing to do to connect with your community.
Yeah, definitely. From my side as well, like collaboration is key. I guess like finding people that have the same goals than you, but also as well like bringing diverse perspective to your work may be helpful. So definitely connection is key to having an impact and developing your ideas.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I guess. Okay, so let me see here. We have some questions in the chat. Okay, so Carlos is asking for your emails for the consultations later. I will advertise about our email for the mentoring our event here, and we potentially can forward it to our mentors here. And Jesus also have a question for Fabian about opportunity in industry for producing active learning methods for video and so on. So I guess we are out of time here to answer this particular question as well. But if Fabian, you could follow up with me, Josué, you can send an email to all the others to this particular email here in the chat. That I will be happy to connect you with Fabian and the others if they have time to do so. If they have time for it. So this is my email. I put it into the chat, so I'll be happy to connect you later. But I guess we are, we run out of time. So I would like to ask you guys if you have anything else to comment on, on these closing remarks here.
Sure. Really quickly, thank you everybody for coming. It's always amazing to connect with everybody in the LatinX and AI community. For NVIDIA, like I said earlier, we're always recruiting year round. We have a lot of stuff going on at CVPR, and I hope you guys can swing by and check us out. Have a great conference.
Thank you, Monica. Okay, so if you do not have any other comments here, I would, I just want to finish here with some takeaways here that I could get from here today. So first of all, I guess we cannot abandon our passion and have to be, persistent. And of course, I guess we discussed about having or not a PhD as a requirement or as a must-have thing. And I guess it's clear that is not right. So it's much more important in a perspective from, a training, how for us to become more mature, right? So, and so on. So I guess we here learned that we have to go beyond, right? Look beyond not only your number of papers, not only how many connections do you have, but also how are you impacting, right, the community? How can you show yourself as a good and resourceful, person? So thank you all of you for being here. I appreciate for taking this time to join us today. It was a pretty great conversation. I have everybody here got a lot of good insights, and so I couldn't thank you more. So it was a great pleasure to be here sharing this this moment with you. So I guess we are, going further with our schedule. I just want to invite you before, leaving here. I just want to invite you. We are about to have another mentoring sessions where we will about to receive some members of our community, PhD students and so on, to discuss, right, a bit more. So please, you're more than welcome to join us there, and I'll be happy to have you. Other than that, thanks again, Brian, Sergey, Guillermo, Monica, Nikhil, and Fabian. We really appreciate your time here. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you.